Forget the never-ending wait for a vaporous chrono break. It seems like it's never coming. Instead, let's look at a game that's inspired by Chrono Trigger and other great 90s era action RPG titles. Sea of Stars by a developer going by the name of Sabotage. This game promises to bring the best of those worlds and add even more depth for what is setting up to be quite the magical and epic adventure. Sea of Stars is considered to be a pixel art game, with lush and beautiful 2D visuals from well-animated and detailed character sprites to gorgeous and colorful backgrounds. This preview is going to be based on the playable demo that can be found on the Nintendo Switch eShop, as that's what was accessible to me. The demo begins on a mountaintop of sorts, with our characters seemingly looking to secure a water vessel for some aim that isn't clear. The starting area gives the player a taste of what's to come with the interactive environments. The player is able to jump up onto ledges and use switches to modify the environment in order to progress or access secret areas. This is also when we receive our first taste of combat. Combat is obviously inspired by a game like Chrono Trigger. Enemies are visible on the field and can be avoided entirely in some cases, or proactively interacted with to deal some damage before battle and gain a slight advantage. The opposite is also true, as enemies can lob an attack your way if you don't watch out. Players take turns between their party and the enemies involved, but I'll talk a little more about combat later in further detail. But let's take a moment to point out that Garl uses a cauldron pot lid as a weapon. For whatever reason, I love that. Once the player solves the simple puzzle before them in this region, the demo seems to skip some intervening plot points because it says your party arrives after some adventures, and suddenly you're in a tavern and need to speak with some pirates. After losing an arm wrestling challenge, it seems they will provide the vessel needed, but first we have to acquire a specific item they're in search of for redacted reasons. This item is located in an ancient, abandoned mage's laboratory that hasn't been opened in hundreds of years. But first, we're going to explore this town a little bit. I'm already in love with this after just spending a little bit of time in the town. When I first saw the ocean waves beating against the sand, I was drawn for whatever reason to try jumping in, and sure enough, you can swim. After swimming around for a while, I began talking to the various NPCs in the town, and one mentioned that he had seen someone swimming beneath the dock, at which point finding said dock became my next priority. I did eventually locate this secret, and I look forward to many more like it in the full retail release. The town is a lot larger than I expected, and it makes me inclined to believe this is going to be a game packed with content. Once you've taken a look at the shops and talked to all the NPCs, you're ready to head on. We're treated with the world map, which is strongly reminiscent of Chrono Trigger or Cross, and, no surprise, it's also beautifully drawn and animated. There is an area to the southwest that can't be accessed, but if you stand on or near it for a period of time and try to access it, a message appears indicating that while it's not accessible in the demo, the player is allowed to stand on that tile and listen to one of the guest tracks from famed and coveted composer Yasunori Mitsuda, famous for various soundtracks, including some of my personal favorites like Xenogears. Making our way to the north and east, the player can make a pit stop at the fishing pond. The fishing mechanics are pretty fun and reward the player with restorative items or items used for cooking. After you've caught your fill, the Mage's Tower can be discovered just to the east of there. We're treated to even more charm and detailed art as the characters make their way into the tower rather forcefully. Once inside, there's a rest area and what seems to be an obvious puzzle of sorts. Another tool at the player's disposal is a Mistral Bracelet, which allows a puff of air to be used that allows interaction with objects on the map. In this case, we can use it to push a block that allows some vertical access. Entering the dungeon reminds me a lot of Chrono Trigger meets Wild Arms series in the sense that you are using a tool, jumping around often to alter the environment and whatnot. The verticality is quite awesome. Various areas in the dungeon are locked in sequence as you hit switches or otherwise change the environment to access previously inaccessible areas. The goal is to acquire several colored crystals throughout the dungeon, and each crystal placed on the central pedestal at the entrance opens a new portal to another area. Along the way, the player activates a second pedestal and 2 crystals can be placed upon it to open a new portal. Once the third pedestal was activated and I had all 3 crystals, I couldn't help but try alternate combinations to see what would happen, as I had the impression it would open a gate to a new area I hadn't been to. And I was right. The combination opened the door to what felt like a secret and optional fishing pond with a side quest attached. Some unknown creature in a barrel has had its watch stolen, and one of the creatures in the pond has it. Fishing ensued, which I enjoyed quite a bit as the mechanic is simple but well executed, and I was awarded with some new armor. This is a good time to talk about the campfire system. In the dungeon and other areas, the player can activate a campfire where one is present. This allows access to cooking as well as resting. Cooking is an interesting feature which allows the player to combine loot acquired from battles and other sources into restorative and possibly other items. This was critical for meandering through the dungeon, as after each portal room I took the time to rest at the campfire and cook a few more restorative items to help me along, because the demo wasn't easy. By no means was it hard, in fact the challenge felt just about right. The possibility for a character to die in battle seemed real if I wanted to preserve healing items for future tough fights, and mana is in short supply. Another option at the campfire is a sort of story time. A character called Teeks is traveling with the party, and if you're resting at a campfire, she's available to be interacted with. She will ask if you want to hear a story, and I presume that as the game carries on, she will acquire more stories to tell. But for now, she states that she only has one, and that it's a bit spooky. She relays a story about the curse of a vessel known as the Vespertine, and talks about an ever-present storm on the open seas. I figure this will come into play later in the game, but I really like the storytime aspect, and it seems like, if put to good use, can really set the tone and provide optional, interesting story-related lore for the game. I love the combat in this game. As mentioned, it's reminiscent of Chrono Trigger with active elements. For example, if you press A at the moment of attack, the character gets a critical bonus of sorts, and if A is pressed right upon receiving a blow, a lower damage is dealt as a sort of partial block is activated. In addition, small particles are sometimes strewn on the battlefield, and those can be accumulated in a character's turn in order to do more damage. Some special moves require input from the player, such as the Moonerang. This attack launches a projectile towards the enemy, but the caveat is that the player has to hit A as soon as it returns or it doesn't continue to launch. This projectile gets faster and faster, but presumably it can go on indefinitely so long as you're coordinated and fast enough to keep hitting the button at the right moment, but it becomes very fast. Combo attacks are also an unlockable feature. There's a combo meter in the corner that builds up over successive attacks and so forth. Once filled, a player can then utilize the combo attacks between multiple characters in the vein of Chrono Trigger. These attacks also have a benefit of restoring MP, which can be pretty important if consumables are in short supply. This combat system promises a lot of depth as the game proceeds, and I'm excited to try the full retail release, which happens in the second half of 2023. With my new armor now equipped and my party well rested, I proceeded to place the third crystal on the pillar, which I figured would take me to a boss fight. I was proven correct. The boss has a couple of different forms and can also launch a combustible to the field. I love the sprite animation here, and had a decent challenge in the sense that I had to be sure to use my consumables and spells wisely, while recharging my mana through the use of combo attacks between characters. While it did only take me one attempt, I still enjoyed the fight and look forward to future boss fights. Regretfully, that's the finale of the demo, and I couldn't help but find myself wanting to play more. This game wasn't on my radar before, but it definitely is now, and I suggest you look into it if you're a fan of these sorts of retro RPG titles. The game will be available on Nintendo Switch and Steam, though I believe a PlayStation version is also in the works. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me gush for a few moments about this game. The demo is available for anyone to take a look at if they're interested. If you liked my video, please like, comment, or subscribe and download this demo. Until next time.